Well, hey there, writer. Welcome to the Resilient Writers Radio Show. I'm your host, Rhonda Douglas, and this is the podcast for writers who want to create and sustain a writing life they love. Because, let's face it, the writing life has its ups and downs, and we want to not just write, but also to be able to enjoy the process, so that we'll spend more time with our butt in chair getting those words on the page. This podcast is for writers who love books and everything that goes into the making of them. For writers who want to learn and grow in their craft and improve their writing skills. Writers who want to finish their books and get them out into the world so their ideal readers can enjoy them. Writers who want to spend more time in that flow state. Writers who want to connect with other writers to celebrate and be in community in this crazy roller coaster ride we call the writing life. We are resilient writers. We're writing for the rest of our lives, and we're having a good time doing it. So welcome, writer. I'm so glad you're here. Let's jump right into today's show. Well, hey there, writer. Welcome back to another episode of the Resilient Writers Radio Show. I'm excited today to be talking to Mel West. Mel West is an American author whose work and wide network of family and friends means she invariably lives in between cities, between versions of herself, and between the life she's built and the one she still imagines. She spends as much time as possible with her husband in their Zurich apartment, where she writes, reflects, and attempts to navigate the chaos of modern adulthood. Now is Not a Good Time for a Breakdown is her debut novel, and that's what we'll be talking about today. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you. So excited to be here.
So you're in Zurich.
Yes, I am.
Oh, fabulous. Okay, great. So talk to me about where the idea for this debut novel came from.
Yeah, so I like this idea that I learned about from Elizabeth Gilbert's Big Magic, that ideas, try to find people who will birth them.
Yes, I love that idea.
And that for me was my experience with the novel. Like, I started to hear kind of snippets of conversations or like a monologue that I thought was really interesting or funny, and just was kind of writing it down, not really understanding where it was coming from or anything. At the time I was living in Boulder, Colorado. Mm-hmm. I moved to New York City, and suddenly I understood, like, oh, the character I've been hearing lives here. Like, this is where she is. This is her life. And everything just started unfolding for me then. So I in a lot of ways feel like I can't take credit for the idea. But I felt really drawn to it because it was so similar to my experience being a millennial and trying to understand what's going on, my friends' experiences. So it felt very relatable and exciting to just like watch this character and her story unfold, like the more I walked around the city.
Yeah. Wow. So are you someone who like plots out an entire novel, or do you write like a discovery draft and then like tell yourself the story and then kind of revise it and figure out like how close am I now to what I want to tell?
I would say at the beginning I was just kind of writing very chaotically, like whatever was coming up, whatever felt right. And then I hit a wall and I said, okay, I need to like plot out the plot points, what's coming next, at least something I could start working on. And I started working on it 2018, 2019, and then kind of let it drop. And I had a really hard time during the pandemic, like, it was, very difficult for me for multiple reasons. And through that time, I kind of realized, wait, this is part of her story too. And that's why I could never quite get to an end. So then I had to go back and revise. But I like to let it be loose at the beginning and then build structure once I feel like I'm losing momentum.
You kind of know what you're doing. Yeah. So this is your debut novel. Had you started writing a novel before, or is this the first time where you thought, oh, I think I've got something like a novel here?
I have many half concocted novels sitting somewhere.
In the drawer. Yeah.
Half novels in the drawer. Yeah. I've always wanted to be a writer. My parents joke about like they bound my first book, Where's the Dog? Right. When I was in the first grade.
Oh, that's
but then it's like life gets in the way. You start to doubt your ability to be creative or to do anything. So this is the first one where I really was like, no, I have to like follow this through because it just
Yeah.
felt so strong. Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And so, what are the biggest lessons that you learned about writing a novel through writing Now is Not a Good Time for a Breakdown? I love the title, by the way. Great title. Now is not a
Thank
good
you.
time for a breakdown. Yeah.
I tell myself that many times a day. I think, I mean, I feel like the biggest lesson I learned for me personally, and I think it relates to a lot of people, is that a lot of times the reason you don't finish or follow through or even continue is there's so many like fears that go into it, right? Like,
Right.
um, you're afraid of when you're writing, like, is this stupid? Does this sound good? Versus just
Right.
getting it out on the page and then saying, I'll fix it later. Like,
Right.
if I don't like it, I can fix it later. And then even it took me so long to finish this book, and I finally realized I was afraid of what happens next. Like, once I actually finish a novel I've always wanted to do, then what happens next? So I think like what I realize is fear is our biggest limiter to actually doing the work, not
Right.
your talent or your skills or your follow through. It's really just like what's going on in the back of your head you're pretending you don't hear, but is kind of driving you.
Yeah, totally. So, tell me a little bit about, so this book is described as darkly humorous. Um, Tell me a little bit about the humor and how you handle that in this book.
I think there's a few different pieces. The main character is not very self aware,
Ah,
so a lot of the things she says end up being accidentally funny because she's just not really realizing like what's coming out of her mouth.
yeah,
Um, and I mean, just generally like the way I am. So I think this obviously influences my writing style. Is I always try to take anything dark and make it funny. So there's always sort of that humorous spin on things. Um, but then the dark part is like the whole novel is sort of a commentary on the fragility of mental health. And so while she's dealing with her own mental health struggles, but like, I mean, this character's never been to therapy. She doesn't know like any of the tools, any of the talk. So it ends up kind of being, she's like a naivety to the way she's approaching things that I think is, sort of cute and amusing.
right. So, so it has this theme running through it of mental health.
Mm-hmm.
How did you approach that, like integrating that theme within the novel without like making it too, here I am beating you over the head with, pay attention to your mental health kind of, thing. Did you think about that as you were working on the novel?
Yeah, I was actually inspired by The Sopranos.
What? Oh, I love
And
that.
how I don't know where I heard this or who said this, but I saw some review about The Sopranos and they were talking about how his time with his therapist was like actually a really interesting way to let the story unfold because you
Yeah.
get to understand him. And I loved that concept, but originally I was trying to, have her have a therapist, and I just felt like that wasn't right for the character. So instead, the way you get those deeper thoughts and feelings is through these like little vignettes. So you have the plot flowing. And like I said, she's very unaware. So she's not saying, during like while you're watching it unfold, like, oh, I feel unwell, but then you get this kind of like vignette that's a look inside her mind. Yeah.
Okay. So you initially tried having her have a therapist.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find then that it was basically like her telling the therapist the plot of the book? Like it was kind of awkward to manage? Because I do think a therapist relationship in a book is a little hard to manage.
Yeah, I just felt like it felt so untrue to her because she she's really someone who's just surviving. Like,
Right.
she's like, I have this job, it's very hard. I think maybe I want to get married, I have to date, but I don't know. Maybe, so she's just really surviving her life. So it felt so unnatural to her that she would sit there and tell someone this is what's going on, that
Right. It just
when
didn't
I
work
start,
for the character.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So, were you living in New York at the time you were writing of New York?
Yes, I was. Yeah.
Yeah. So, how much does New York kind of, fit into the setting, and how did you approach like, I don't know, having the reader feel like, oh yeah, I'm really in a book that is like I'm full on in New York with this character.
Yeah. So, I don't, I would say I just like drop little things in that, maybe somebody not in New York will be like, what, like, she goes to Madison Square Eats. And
Right.
if you lived in New York before 2020, you know exactly what that is. But even if you didn't, you kind of have an idea of what it could be. So just like little touches about, being on the subway and where she lives, but not trying to like, you have to have been to New York and New York
Right.
like
Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah.
very well. Yeah.
I love that. And I love to read a book that's like set in a place where I don't live, you know? So I think a lot of us read in part for that experience of like being
Yeah.
somewhere else, right? Yeah. So you wrote a draft and then you said you didn't really write during the pandemic. So how long did it take you from like, oh, I have this great idea, I think it's a novel, to actually finishing the novel? Like to the point where it
So
could be published.
the point from like the idea to actually publishing is 9 years.
But
But
you
the
did
point
write
from
for a few years in there.
right,
Yeah.
right. I would say I stopped writing kind of in 2020. I picked it back up at the end of 23, and then by May 24, I had like a really solid draft, but then I started going out to get published. Yeah.
Okay, great. So tell me a little bit about your publishing journey. How did you make the decision? You're with Archway, right? So how did you make the
hmm
decision to go with Archway? And what kind of factors, like, what were you thinking about when you were thinking about publishing?
In full transparency, I wish I would have known a lot more then than I know now as I was making these decisions. And that's why I think
Right,
podcasts like yours are so
right,
valuable. But I, had tried to go the traditional publishing way. I got a lot of feedback that the industry has changed. For my genre specifically, the feedback I received was they want to know that you have a lot of followers, that you have, this big audience already, that you already have a book. Otherwise, it's harder. So I kind of received that feedback and thought, well, I'll go this hybrid route with Archway. And I just, man, I think it's like, it was my first time writing. To me, it felt like this, like I gave birth to something,
yeah,
creatively, and it was so precious to me. And then I think kind of realizing that at the end of the day, publishing is an industry and people are there to make money. I wish I would have approached it more like that versus like, oh, here's my still beating heart that I'm giving to you to
yeah.
bring into the world.
I think
Yeah.
that's so true. And industry has changed a lot since COVID, and it's so much more competitive now in the traditional world. But I think there's also been an explosion of more hybrid places
Mhm.
for the writer that like is willing to go independent but just can't bear the thought of like learning the software to lay out their own book, because which of us wants to do that? I don't,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
So I think the hybrid approach is much more popular now than it ever was. Do you think you go hybrid again for the next book?
I would be open to it. I think now that I feel like okay, I have my like sea legs, so to speak, and I understand it. I know what I would do differently in the hybrid process versus what I did in the beginning. But I do like, I mean, just the timelines are different,
Yeah.
from traditional, even if you get
So
accepted. And then like the creativity, like the creative control that you have over it. I just think it's a nice way to go. Yeah.
Yeah. I think the biggest thing I think for people who decide to go indie is creative control and the fact that you can be published in 6 months instead of 3 years.
Yeah,
You
for
know,
sure.
yeah, that makes a big difference. But it really is hard to release your little book baby, into the industry. So that's really good advice, I think. Yeah. So are you working on something else now?
Yeah, I'm working on so this novel now has got not a good time for a breakdown is kind of focused purely on the main character, very character driven. And now I'm working on more of like a cast of characters, plot driven novel that came to
Fun.
me
Yeah.
while I was in
Another of the
Indonesia.
ideas that was looking for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was in Indonesia for like a few weeks and I just all of a sudden I could see this whole idea. So I've been working on that one. Yeah.
So great. Okay. And what's different about going from, one protagonist, very character-driven novel to something with like a big cast of characters and something that's more plot focused?
I think with the like main character, it's very easy to keep track of
Yeah.
everything, like she's doing this, she's doing that, the different people around her. And this has been like, okay, how are they all coming together? And also like really understanding everyone's motivations and like why are they acting like this? So it feels a little more complex to like really build a lot of
Yeah.
richness even when each character isn't getting as much time on the page.
Yeah, I
So
can
it feels
see.
like a challenge. Yeah.
Yeah. So are you doing more kind of like plotting or outlining than you did for the other book?
Yeah. I mean, so I got the idea and I was like writing, I had, a few ideas written down and then immediately I just started plotting it out because it seemed like way more complicated. Whereas before I felt like I could just kind of flow and this time like I have to be very strategic
Yeah.
about how I'm writing. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's easier to kind of do that, what they call the discovery draft, like write a first draft with one main character or maybe two main characters than
Hmm.
it is for like an ensemble cast where you have a lot of different people coming in and out. You can still do it, but it it's exactly what you said. Like, oh my God, where is everybody now?
Yeah.
How do I do it? It's so great. Yeah, so good. So, for anyone listening, this is your debut novel. You spent quite a lot of time on it. You decided to go the hybrid publishing route. For anyone listening who is trying to finish their novel and doesn't yet know what they're going to do you have any advice for someone who's kind of at that stage yet where they haven't finished?
um, I guess two things. One thing is I would figure out what happens next. Like I would spend time researching your options. What are you getting yourself into? Because especially like if you go the hybrid novel or sorry, hybrid publishing way, or even if you try to go traditional, like
Yeah,
my understanding is in the landscape we're in, like you really need to start like building your social media following or whatever it is,
yeah,
some sort of following. Either way, you're going to want to do that. And I know like, I'm sure most authors are like, no, not like,
yeah,
please don't make me go out there. But like figuring that out, like what's going to feel comfortable for you, maybe like
right,
Substack, which
yeah,
is less like, here's my face, whatever that's going to be for you. Because I think that kind of makes it less scary, like for people like me who are afraid of what comes next. If you know what's coming next and you feel like you've prepared yourself, I think you're kind of moving past that.
right.
And then I think if you're just afraid to finish it for any other reason, I would really just kind of be looking at like what happened, like what is going on in me that I feel like I don't want this to be the end.
Yeah, totally. It's so common to kind of like see the light at the end of the tunnel and be like, "Oh no, 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 no! I don't want, I don't want this." So you're on TikTok
Yeah.
as
Hmm.
an author. How's that been for you?
I find so. I prefer TikTok as an author to Instagram, even though like it was a little bit of a learning curve for me because, you know, I started on Instagram. I was very familiar with that, but that's like my friends and family. But I find like TikTok is much more open to long form. So, you know, just talking about what's going on. Like, you don't have to be so polished on TikTok in a way I feel like Instagram likes. But it's been really
like more authentic to you. Like, okay.
Yeah, way more authentic. Like, you don't have to worry as much about what you're saying. I mean, like, not that I'm just throwing things out there, but it feels like you can kind of have a conversation,
right,
or a monologue, I guess.
Yeah.
And I find it's way easier to build community because people are looking for, like, I want to be connected to other authors here in a way I feel like you don't get on Instagram so much.
Yeah. That's so great. Thanks so much for being with me today, Mel. It was so great to talk to you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Thanks so much for hanging out with me today and for listening all the way to the end. I hope you enjoyed today's episode of the Resilient Writers Radio Show. While you're here, I would really appreciate it if you'd consider leaving a rating and review of the show. You can do that in whatever app you're using to listen to the show right now, and it just takes a few minutes. Your ratings and reviews tell the podcast algorithm gods that yes, this is a great show. Definitely recommend it to other writers. And that will help us reach new listeners who might need a boost in their writing lives today as well. So please take a moment and leave a review. I'd really appreciate it, and I promise to read every single one. Thank you so much.